one of the best things that you can do for yourself when you start learning sewing is to learn good habits from the start, because we all know it is way harder to actually try and stop a bad habit than it is to simply just start a new good one. I have actually already made a video on the 5 top good habits that I think that you should have when you start sewing. It did really, really well, and you guys just loved it so much. So I thought, it was over a year ago, so I thought it's time for an update on that video. And these are 5 more good sewing habits that you need, but these ones are also picked by you. Welcome back, my lovely ladies and gents. Thank you so much for joining this video. If we haven't actually met yet, my name's Evelyn Wood. I'm a dressmaker, sewing teacher at vintagesewingschool.com. And as I said, I have actually already made one video about sewing habits, and you guys loved it. So there was just like, if you have a look at the comments there on that video, I'll link it down below so you can watch it after this one. There's just like comments and comments of all these fantastic, great tips and tricks from you guys that have added to the great sewing habits that we all need. So when I talk about a habit, what do I mean? I mean not necessarily as tips for sewing, but habits. Things that you want to do without even sort of using any brain power to do them. It just becomes a habit that you can free up that brain space to actually think about things like garment construction and sewing, and not sewing things in the wrong way around together. So I thought about doing, the top, 50, but I thought I'd just stick to another 5 good habits so we can really talk about them. And so these are the 5 top more habits that you need as voted by you guys in the last video, and ones that I obviously agree with as well. And I actually do have one bonus habit because there are just so many good ones. So stick around right to the very, very end, and I also have a bonus. But here's the top 5. Let's get started. Keep your fabric scissors just for fabric and your paper scissors just for paper. Now, I don't even consider this a habit. This is a rule. This is like the first rule of sewing, is your fabric scissors are only to cut fabric. Nothing else. Doesn't matter what the circumstances are. Don't care what it is. Absolutely, the answer is no. The fabric scissors are just for fabric. Everyone knows this, right? It's always like, it's still actually a running joke in my family, particularly my dad wanting to come and try and use my really nice sharp fabric scissors for cutting gosh knows what. The answer is always no. So this one was actually from Deb Elderly, and her comment was, one of my habits is to never use my fabric scissors to cut anything but fabric or threads. My kids knew never to touch my fabric scissors, and I always made sure they had a simple, ample supply of paper scissors so that they were never tempted. Exactly right. So you should always have your fabric scissors that are just your fabric shears, right? These are just for fabric. You don't want them to get blunt, you don't want them to get sticky tape on them or any of that, and you have paper scissors just for paper. More than a rule, it's the first law of sewing. The next one is no pins in your mouth, ever. Yes, you should definitely develop this habit. Putting pins in your mouth is kind of natural because what do you do with them? But it is a very dangerous habit, and I must admit this is one that I am a bit guilty of. Many people suggested this, but the most highly voted one was from Mirage Sir, and she said, no pins in your mouth. A sudden fright, cough, anything like that, and you might swallow one. Yeah, really dangerous. So a better idea is to make yourself a little wrist pin cushion from my tutorial that I have here. I'll link that down below, so check the description box. Make yourself a wrist pin cushion. Once I had one of these, and it's always there to put my pins in, it's much easier to use this, otherwise then you stop using your mouth to put the pins in. So it's all about having better habits using this than using your mouth. The next good habit that you should have is to always do a mock-up or a toile first. So this one was suggested by Princess No Nap. She said, if using expensive fabric and a new pattern, make the pattern using a cheap material first, so you need to alter anything you don't accidentally damage the more expensive material. That is exactly the point of a toile or a mock-up or a muslin, you might call it, is to test run your pattern first. Just get into the habit of it. Don't even let it cross your thought pattern, just do it. Just do your toile first. It's like a practice, a test run, so you can get to know how to sew it together, particularly when you're first learning. This is crucial. You can test the fit, you can test everything before you cut into your really good expensive fabric. So get into the habit of just doing your toile or your mock-up first. Don't even think about it, just do it. The next habit is to correctly label and mark all of your patterns, transfers, tracings. Mark and label them before you put them away. This one is so important, I think. This one was suggested by David, and he said, I always trace my pattern so that I leave the original pattern pieces intact. My habit is to always put the pattern number on each traced piece so you know which pattern it belongs to, and then store the drafted pieces in a Ziploc bag, which I store with the original pattern. So the method of which you either trace or don't trace, or how you store it, is up to you, but I think it is so critical because so many of us either trace our patterns or create new ones from those, and you need to make sure that everything is labeled. This is something I'm so strict about with my students, in that every piece is labeled, and you have all of the, like, there's a certain things that you need to label them with to make sure that when you go back next time, you know exactly what you're looking at. It is such a critical habit to do, because if you keep thinking like, I'll remember next time, trust me, you never remember what you did or what this pattern is from next time. Just get into the habit of labeling all your patterns, everything, all your pattern pieces, your tracings, your everything. Label them correctly before you store them away. The next habit is to read through fully the pattern instructions before you start. Read every single one of them all the way through. This is so key. You need to get that sort of like 5,000 foot look down at the project of what you're doing, all the steps ahead of what you're doing, to be able to put it all together in your mind and make it work. It makes these less confusing, I promise. This one was suggested by Rara Avis. She says, if you sew with patterns, always read the instructions in full before you even start the project. There's almost always something you'll get wrong or wish you had done differently otherwise. I absolutely agree. It is a good habit to get into before you start your project. One of the things that you do, and I tell my students this all the time again as well, the same thing, you must read through all of the instructions. Get that 5,000 foot view of the entire project, how everything's going together. It'll make you, everything will sort of click into your brain more about the whole process all the way through, so you can know why you're doing this step, this step, this step, this step, and the order that they're supposed to be in, and it makes these a little bit more manageable. So the good habit, read through in full the instructions before you start any project. Now I do have one more bonus habit for you, and I'll tell you that in just a moment. But first, I want to know, which one is your favorite habit? Do you think is the most important? And let me know some other habits that you think that we should include for maybe the next video. Maybe I do a huge compilation. I love hearing them all. So please put your comments below and let me know. It is my hope to see more people sewing at home in this world. So if you know someone who is new to sewing or could use this video, they might like it, I'd be so grateful if you shared it with them. If you have not actually subscribed, here on this channel we do everything about sewing, vintage and fashion, thrifting, and all of the above. So hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Boa's sewing habit is from Arpine, and she says, I like keeping a sewing diary where I write down lessons learned as tips, advice for sewing similar garments next time. I couldn't agree more. Keep a little notebook, a journal near your, right near your sewing machine or wherever you sew, so that you can write down all those things that you've learnt along the way, things you want to remember for next time. And it's like your sewing journey is your little diary here. It's a great habit to get into. And until next time, bye. Hands up if you agree with me. refolding patterns, and the instructions aren't so bad, but the patterns in particular, I have to refold them back into the lines that they were there already. Otherwise, it drives me crazy. It's like the bane of my existence is afterwards trying to fold it all back up to the same, right? Please agree with me. You're the same, right? Don't tell me you're one of those people that scrunch it all up and put it in.